Hello, Activists. Today I have a very special guest with me today, Ludory from Unaltered. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good.
Awesome. So, for those who don't know, who are you?
Who am I? Um, so I created the group Unaltered. It's a data-driven campaign to reduce circumcisions. It's about, I think, a month old now, and I'm really excited to see what I can do and what the group can do to help in activism.
All right, awesome. So, I was told you have a slideshow for us, so I'm gonna let you do your presentation
Oh,
and then
100%.
we'll ask questions after.
Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if you want to, mid-slide or something.
Okay.
See.
I'll probably just wait till the end and ask
Okay,
questions.
I don't mind. Yeah, so I preferred like a short slideshow, just to give a quick overview of like Unaltered myself and proactively address some questions that some members asked in your Discord server. So, who am I? So, I just want to like give a quick overview so that you know that I'm a human being and not some bot or something. So I have some interests that are pretty nerdy in math and social sciences. But what I'm interested in is applying that to solve social problems like intactivism using data science. You can find me in the Unaltered Discord server. Hopefully, you'll put the link in the description of the YouTube video. And I'm usually free from 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, but just hit me up and let me know. And then, we can arrange something. Usually, the best ways to reach me is on Discord and through email. And my email's listed there. Maybe put that in the description as well. I'm not sure. So just a quick overview of this slideshow. I'm just gonna talk about like expectations and activism, what Unaltered is, what kind of organizations make the most impact, why are volunteer efforts and donations often ineffective, and what can activists do to be effective. If I miss anything, I definitely welcome questions, feedback, suggestions, whatever in the Unaltered Discord server or however you want to contact me. And I just want to just reiterate that everyone can contribute to activism, even if you have commitments outside of that. So I just wanted to just make it clear that like an altar is not going to be a like a panacea for its activism. It's a very complex social problem, but effective activism has already been researched. There's a lot of political science research on like what works and what doesn't work for activism in general. And also it has like a domino effect. So like the stuff we do today builds up activism for tomorrow, and it is a more of a marathon than a sprint. So a frustration people have is expecting solutions to happen overnight. That doesn't happen with activism. And also like getting involved is an opportunity to build a movement, and also anyone can contribute, as I said earlier. So activism is flexible and can be part-time. You don't have to do like go all in into it. So, Unaltered is a data driven campaign to reduce circumcisions. Our vision is a world where all foreskins are intact, and our mission is to reduce circumcisions using research based strategies. So, for example, our current campaign, which got funded, is the printable leaflet stickers. So, that's going to be a website where intactivists anywhere who has internet can just download these and distribute them to their local area or wherever they want to distribute them to. Based on conservative calculations, it costs about $20 on average to save a baby from circumcision using this, but I expect it's probably closer to like $5 to $10. And the follow-up study, so we want to measure the impact of the talking points used in the leaflets to see which ones are most effective at persuading people to not cut their babies. So that is going to be done through MTurk and is expected to cost maybe at most $50, depending on how I designed it. But it's probably going to be closer to $10 to $20. It just depends on the level of detail I need to measure that impact. So Unaltered is new. It's about a month old, so we do have obstacles in terms of like getting lifting off the ground, in terms of volunteers, people who can help contribute. So we have someone like Azuko who is using their 3D CAD skills to do their own project within Unaltered. I 100% support that, and I'm really excited to see where that goes. So really, we just need more people who have like specific skills that can contribute to into activism. And we are funding constrained insofar as I definitely underestimated how much time I had to devote to interactivism. So I've been like running off of like about 10 hours a week contributing to the work in Unaltered. So ideally I would like to like be able to get funding for Unaltered's coffee so that I can devote less time on work and more time on interactivist work. So I just want to give a quick overview of like what kinds of organizations make most impact, because it seems like a lot of people want to know like exactly what is effective and what's not effective. And so like at a bare minimum, like organizations should provide evidence, which is pretty obvious, right? Evidence of their impact. They should also be cost effective. So for example, like maybe a $10,000 book, we have to like evaluate how many babies would that save versus like, let's say leaflets that you could just print out, right? At like 7 cents a page. We also have to consider like room for funding. So if an organization already has a lot of funding, how much will additional funding actually contribute? Will they actually be able to utilize that extra funding versus, say, a neglected organization that has great ideas, but they just don't have the funding to make their ideas a reality? And then transparency is also big. So, as I mentioned, I welcome people to ask me questions, provide feedback, suggestions in the Unaltered Discord server. And I think transparency is just important in general. You don't want to have an organization where you don't know what's going on, and leaving everyone in the dark is pretty sus. But so ideally, you want an organization to have a track record of actually making an impact. Obviously, Unaltered is very young, so we haven't made an impact yet. But I know that there's other interactivists who have like launched like media campaigns and other stuff that likely made an impact. And speaking of that, so it's important to focus on efforts that have a high chance of success. So you one common thinking trap is, let's just go change policy and just ban circumcision, which is great. I mean, if you do that, then you save 1.4 million babies per year. But how likely is that, right? That's a very high risk, high reward type of strategy. Ideally, you want organizations to focus more on strategies that actually have a high chance of making an impact, even if the reward is less for that. And it also ties back to evidence, in that if there's nothing to show for it because there's all this effort for something that has a high risk of failure, it's not really clear what's working, what's not working, as opposed to just like bad luck, right? And then also, it's important to look at the direct impact of an organization. So, like, are they actually affecting the circumcision rates, or are they just raising awareness in general, right? Because people can know about circumcision and know about activism, but that doesn't really do much to actually reduce the amount of babies that get circumcised. And then like campaign timing. So if there is an upcoming campaign that is likely to make an impact, obviously they would need more funding to or volunteers to make that campaign a reality versus an organization that doesn't have an upcoming campaign. So that's just the gist of what makes organizations very impactful.
All right,
Um,
questions.
yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Go back. All right, so how does Unaltered provide cost effectiveness? Because you went over the evidence part already, but
Yeah.
the
So
cost effectiveness, how do you guys prove that you're cost effective?
prove cost effective. Okay. So this leaflet campaign, there's already pre-existing research that leaflets are effective in persuading people to change their behaviors. In this case, getting parents to not circumcise their babies. Based on those estimates, it's about $20 per baby on average, but those are conservative estimates. So it's probably gonna be more
Okay.
cost efficient than that. Yeah.
Okay, so is Unaltered a leaflet organization, or are you doing multiple things? Because I heard you
No,
say Azuka is doing something different. And is he part of Unaltered? Like, what is your staff, I guess? Like, who
what is our
is
staff?
Unaltered?
Unaltered is pretty decentralized. Unaltered is a Discord server and a coffee account and different people who want to contribute to Activism. So we're still relatively young, and I'm still talking with people to get on board with us, both inside and outside of Activism.
Okay, so how much funding would you need for all of these projects? So I don't know how many projects you're running either. Are you going to cover how many projects Unaltered's running, or are you just going to cover leaflets?
So currently it's just a campaign for the leaflets, but just to clarify, there's going to be multiple different types of campaigns in the future. The idea is that we want to take something that is relatively cheap to pilot test, and obviously things that are backed by research. And after we do the pilot test, we want to measure the impact of that specifically in activism, because even though there's people who devote their life to studying, what works in activism, there's a lot of variance in how effective it is in different movements. Like, say, what might work for veganism might not work as much for abortion rights, right? So it's important to measure how effective that specific strategy is within the context of this specific movement.
Okay. So
So
this whole slideshow is about Unaltered, correct?
it's about an altar, but I also am proactively answering some questions that some people asked in your Discord server. So,
Okay. Well,
but
I'm
I
just making sure because this talks about like what kinds of organizations make the most impact. And out of the ones that we have besides Unaltered, which ones follow the closest besides Unaltered, which is aiming to be of the anti-activist groups that we have now?
That's a really interesting question. Um, I do know of CLR has made an impact by stopping clinics using AAP policy. And I believe the way he measured that is through like government available information on circumcision rates. And also, as well as like looking at the websites of these clinics, in some cases, actually getting shut down. So I would say that would be the closest to it. It's clearly cost effective in that, from what I understand, he devotes like less than 10 hours a week, if that, at like just sending these emails and writing these letters. As far as room for funding, I could see a possibility for like getting more people to help send out these letters to other clinics, as well as automating the redundant or time consuming parts of the process. So I think that there's potential to actually scale this beyond just one person. As far as transparency goes, I mean, I've had personal discussions with CLR. CLR has a website that's open to the public, like detailing exactly what he does. So I definitely think he meets those criteria for that.
Okay. So Is Unaltered going to ever start using CLR's tactics in the future?
I would like to. I already got some documents from CLR that I've studied. I've also took notes in my voice calls with CLR, and I would hope that CLR would give me the opportunity to shadow him and see his process live so that I can emulate that in Unaltered.
Okay. So it definitely seems like Unaltered is sticking with leaflets, but they're open to new ideas as long as it meets these criterias. Because it seems like your criteria is evidence, cost effectiveness, transparency. I don't know what room for funding means. Uh, I mean,
So I can
I
clarify,
feel like if you don't need a lot of funding, I feel like that's the best because then it's just
right?
like, oh, well, just pay me not to work, you know? That's
Exactly.
that would be the best thing to do. Yeah.
Right. So what I mean by room for funding is let's say there's an activist org that has hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Would donating, say, $100 to that organization make that much more impact versus, say, a neglected, underfunded organization that is just short of meeting their cost requirements for their campaign, right? So that's what I mean by room for funding. Um,
Okay, so you mean like best bang for your buck when it comes to
best,
funding?
yeah. So it's kind of related to cost effectiveness, but it's also like can it scale, right? So I mentioned CLR. I do personally believe that his his strategy can scale to more than just one person. And um
Well, I think that's anything.
yeah, but so I mean scale effectively, right? So let's say it costs $10,000 to produce a book, right? Would donating an extra $10,000 to produce a second book make would that double the amount of babies saved for circumcisions? And I suspect it would be less. There would be marginal return to that because you already have one book coming out, right? So if you have a second one coming out, the people who already read the first book are already uh, made up their minds, and the people who refuse to read the first book aren't going to read the second book anyway.
Okay, so
So
essentially in the same vein, do you feel the same way about films as you do books? Because it feels like, oh, well, one anti-circumcision book is enough. Um, or, because once you make two, it's a little bit less effective or a lot more less effective. Do you feel the same way about making films in activism?
that's a
Not
that's
trying to
an
put not trying to put words in your mouth here, but
no, it's okay.
yeah.
That's an interesting question. So mass communication is really important in general because someone can influence a lot of people to do a lot more good than any individual can. However, it's important to consider how you go about that. So, if it's going to cost a ton of money to produce a film to achieve that impact of influencing a ton of people versus, say, uploading a YouTube video, distributing leaflets, things of that nature, or making social media posts, then I would say that because in general, communication can influence a lot of people to do a lot more good than any individual can. However, it's important to evaluate, let's say, the cost of producing a film versus producing YouTube videos, leaflets, or emailing reporters to report on some event. So I would say that if the cost of producing the film is like exorbitant and very prohibitive, it could still make an impact. But then we have to ask, is that the best way to go about it with the funding available?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I like this criteria and system too because it does remove a lot of emotions from intactivism. So I think that's good. I think, evidence-based is way more effective than emotional-based. So yeah, I'll let you continue on your slideshow.
Okay, yeah. And I just want to comment, I agree with that. It's more important to do good than to feel good. And I intend to hold myself accountable and Unaltered accountable to the standards I'm putting out here. And so I just want to clarify like why volunteer efforts and donations are often ineffective to build upon the previous point. So I focus on what was effective, not what's ineffective, are things like a lot of nonprofits have funding to do research on how to manipulate donors. So things that might cause activists to be less effective is appealing to their emotions, like you said. Showing a photo of a specific baby or individual playing sad music, something that induces emotion to compel them to act on those feelings, as well as certain keywords. So words like urgent, critical, emergency. There's other words too, like you or like we, that subtly manipulate people to be more likely to donate or contribute to an organization. On the second point, there are nonprofits are really weird, or organizations are really weird in that they're accountable to volunteers and donors, but they're serving other people than the donors or volunteers. And so we do see some cases where this works. Like if a parent is looking for tutors for their child, or someone's buying a gift card for someone, or a company is training their employees, they have a lot of information about the other person that they're spending for. But let's say, for example, you just match with a new date and you're about to give them a gift, and you've only known them for, let's say, a few weeks. Chances are you're not likely going to get a gift that actually matches what they need. Same thing for like friends of friends, etc. So the parallel here is activists lack a lot of information about people that organizations claim to help. And that's why it's important to focus on the evidence so that we have that information. And that's why aspects like transparency is important, so that volunteers and donors can know how much an organization is actually helping people.
You know what's crazy about that? And I just thought of that because you said that. Do
What?
you know who intactivists help? They actually help the pro-circumcision people and the neutral people to make for like informed decisions and say, hey guys, I know you think you want to circumcise, but you don't actually want to circumcise. But now that I think about it, a lot of intactivist groups, they just target intactivists. They're not targeting the right people.
100%. So there are merits to building up your own activist community, but it's important to avoid echo chambers and actually reach out to people outside of your movement. Most movements do not succeed from a small minority of activists. Usually they succeed from reaching a tipping point or breaking point of people who support the cause. So on my next point, uh, sometimes people feel like they can rely on anecdotes to decide which organizations they should support, and that's fair. But let's say someone tells you XYZ works, but there's a possibility that only X works. There's a possibility that Y actually held back X and was actually harmful. There's also a possibility that, let's say, it's just a coincidence and just these two things are actually unrelated. And even if it does help, we have to consider, is that the best alternative available to maximize our impact? And on my next point, so it seems to me that there's people who rely on correlation and don't dig too deep on what's actually causing change. And so, the old adage, correlation doesn't equal causation, that rings true for activism as well. So, someone in your Discord server asked me what activists can do to be effective. And I want to hone on two key skills. One is a growth mindset, basically just believing that social change can happen. And there's a lot of, again, political science literature that change can happen and has happened historically. There's evidence-based practices that can actually make that change. And it's also important to be effective in our activism and to also seek help from other people. So I have certain skills that maybe some people don't have, but I also acknowledge that I'm not great at everything, and it's important to seek help from others who can do things better than I can. It's easy to get discouraged, and when you don't see results, it's easy to give up on the movement, but I encourage those, especially if they're feeling burnout, to remember that change is possible and to just believe in that. And the next point is to actually do something. So a lot of people think about doing things, but they don't actually do anything. And part of that is that we're just really bad at developing habits as humans. So, one trick that's based in psychology research is this cute phrase: shrink it, link it, and raise a drink to it. So, you take one habit that you want to form and you shrink it to the tiniest task possible. So, for example, let's say I'm having difficulty brushing my teeth. I could shrink it down to say brushing one single tooth or just walking to the washroom to where the toothbrush is, right? And even though it's small at first, the point is that you actually get started because a lot of people don't even start on like whatever they want to do. So in activism, right, people talk about what they want to do, but they never actually get around to doing it. And it's important to not just think about the small task you can do, but actually find time to link it to another one of your habits or routines. So, say I drink coffee every morning, right? Then, and I want to develop a specific habit, I can link that habit to me drinking coffee. So, after I drink coffee, I will do XYZ. That's critical because a lot of people will think about doing something, but they won't actually find ways to make room for doing that thing. And finally, I say raise a drink to it. I personally like soda, but you want to, after you complete this tiny task, you want to celebrate so that you can reinforce your mind, your brain to want to do it more. And this process is a very virtuous cycle. So as you do the tiny tasks, your brain is more adept at taking on larger and larger tasks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hmm. Because this is talking about like developing habits. What habits do you want them to develop as intactivists?
So that's an interesting question. I would like to see more activists volunteer. And a lot of activists talk about doing things, but when other activist organizations ask people for help, suddenly it's like crickets, right? Another thing I would like to see activists do develop a habit of is funding causes that are effective. And something as simple as starting with maybe just a few dollars, $5, that can make a huge impact, especially since more effective organizations, like if let's say the average activist organization is only 10% as effective as the most effective one, $5 towards the most effective one is equivalent to donating $5 to the average activist organization. So even if it's something small, I think that helping, supporting, especially organizations that are underfunded and neglected compared to other organizations that may have tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay. Did you mean that if you give $5 to an activist group that's 10 times better than the other average activist group, that's like giving $50 to the average activist group?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
I
Oh,
was tracking though. I was
my
tracking.
bad. Yeah, no, it's definitely so giving $5 to the most effective organization would amount to $50 for the average if the average is only 10% as effective. So, and that's pretty much my entire presentation. I just wanted to talk about Unaltered and the standards that we are held accountable to, and also just give an inspirational message to intactivists out there.
Okay, guys, that was Ludory, the owner of the brand new Intactivist organization, Unaltered. Let me know what you thought of it and him by commenting down below. I will have all his links down in the description below so you can follow him and maybe even donate if you want. Unaltered is not a non-profit at this time, so no tax write-off if you do choose to support him. I do not get a commission or anything off of his links. Please give this a like and a subscribe so you don't miss interviews part 2 and 3, where I ask more in-depth questions. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and Ludory. It was a fantastic time. Bye!